Good evening and welcome to Mindful Live 144. I am your host, Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. Tonight, we're talking about lawyers. Lawyers are the problem. The problem are lawyers. Now, I don't know how many of you may have seen the YouTube video I did for the day already, but the YouTube video I did today came up to something like nearly 50 minutes long, 50, and it still didn't cover everything around the topic where I was talking about the indemnity deal. The indemnity deal that seems to be lots in the public these days, and what was done with the King's Counsel and the Attorney General. And when you follow this story, you get the picture that lawyers are the problem out there. Lawyers, listen, lawyers are the problem are the lawyers. I have so many problems with the legal system on a whole. When you think about it, I always think about this. How could it possibly be justice if I could pay for a better lawyer that will get me a better shot at justice? Anytime, there's no way this thing could be justice if by me paying a little more money, it increases my chances of getting justice. Then, by very definition, that's not justice. But c'est la vie, that's the life we live, that's the reality that we survive in. And that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. We're going to be perusing through some of that tonight, going through the saga that is that winding tale with the King's Counsel and the Attorney General previous and the Attorney General before him, and the corruption that was being alleged between them. Listen, the story gets thick. The story gets thick and muddy. We're going to see if we could go through some of this and, in the usual tone, discuss this and see what the ideas are behind this. Now, this is political weaponry for lots of people out there. On one side, the government side, they were using this as ammunition to pelt at the opposition, showing corruption, and then now on the opposition side, they're throwing it back at the government, that the government was involved in some shady dealings here, and that's what is causing this. I think this has enough blame to go around to everyone, and it shows it's either they're all relatively incompetent or they're kind of all in it together. You take your pick of which one of those might be the more likely reality. All right, so if you are streaming this over on TikTok or on Instagram, you can feel free at any point in time, at some point in time in the future, obviously, to head over there to YouTube. Yeah, Chiny Douglas. Hopefully I'll get working on that. I should. Yeah, head over there to YouTube and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Nathan Springer, over there. You would find the rest of lives that you may have missed and you want to catch up on. If you are so interested, there are lots of lives there. When I sit and I consider, we're on Mindful Live 144 now, and each live is like an hour or more. Wow, that's a lot of time. That's days upon days upon days straight of just me talking. So if you're interested in such things, you can head over to my YouTube channel. The lives are there. There are other videos there also. Other videos I upload on various different topics. You may find it interesting. Also, there's Mindful Education, the institution that I run. We offer learning pods from preschool ages straight up to CXC. If you are so interested, we have already begun, but the registration continues during the term. Anytime you are interested, please do check us out. It's particularly these days, the early primary pods are really shooting off. They're very interesting, and I'm really enjoying that age group. So yes, if you are interested in such, you have a child, you have chargeling of any of that school age and they're interested in such, feel free to contact us over at Mindful Education on Instagram. Now, let's dive into some of these stories and see where this whole mystery leads. Vincent Nelson unraveled. Vincent Nelson unraveled from conspirator to whistleblower to uncooperative witness. A deathbed resolution to make amends, triggered by a call from a former attorney general, led Vincent Nelson King's counsel to unburden himself and spill the beans about alleged wrongdoing detailed in his notarized statement of October 5th, 2017. This, according to the amended defense of the attorney general submitted in a civil suit. So, we're getting into the legal issues here. The King's Counsel, I did a video on that also. The King's Counsel is basically the highest rank of lawyer in the Commonwealth, you know, the countries that England used to own at one point in time. King's Counsel is basically the highest rank you could reach in the general legal sphere, and this man attained that. He's from Jamaica originally, and he was residing in England. He was a King's Counsel, and the story goes that some point in time in the early 2010s, he was contacted by the then Attorney General, who would have been the Attorney General under the People's Partnership, Mr. Ram Logan. And he says he was contacted, you know, to do several probes and investigations. And here's the interesting thing with this. The allegations are that the partnership government, the Attorney General of the partnership government, went out there and contacted this man back then to investigate the previous PNM government. He wanted to investigate the Petrotrin of the previous government and investigate some of the dealings and decisions that they made. He wanted to find the corruption. You're getting the irony of, well, you'll get the irony eventually if you don't get it yet, because yeah, in searching for that corruption, there are corruption allegations here, and now in searching for the corruption during that time, there are corruption allegations here now. It's just a whole cycle. Like by now, it could be reasonable to tell each government when they come into power, listen, don't try to find corruption. No, please, Mr. Politician, government minister, sir, you don't find any corruption of previous administrations. No, please don't do it. Because it seems like in finding the corruption is where the real corruption generally happens. Anyway, Mr. Nelson was allegedly hired back then to serve as outside legal counsel for the partnership during that period. Now, there are several allegations that were made because of this. We'll get to the allegations, but to get to how this matter eventually blew up is after the allegations. Because after he served all this time under the partnership, the 5 years he was working in Trinidad alongside the partnership, when the government changed, money was owed. A lot of money was owed, actually. Around £1 million. Around that time, that £1 million would have translated to about 10 million TT dollars. That's not small money. That's real money was owed. The government owed him money. Now, that's a problem that it wasn't only something he faced. That was a problem that the partnership left quite a bit of. Many people who ran in with contracts to get a nice little bit of contracts from the government during that period, because lots of contracts were being, you know, just given out all very wildly. You definitely in the wrong profession, yeah, maybe. But he isn't having all that good time right now, so who knows? But yes, many of the contractors, after the governments changed during that 2015 period, they were struggling to get the money that they were supposed to be owed. They were owed money from the previous administration. They weren't able to collect all that money, and now many of them are still struggling to get paid. Something funny with that, I don't know how many of you were around during the when I was doing the Tobago Day, not last week, I believe that would have been the week before, when we were talking about the Tobago Day. And Tobago is talking about doing contracts with a similar kind of thinking. They don't have the money to do the entire contract yet, so they're going to get the contractor to put out the money first and pay the contractor eventually. Now, Bear in mind, governments change. And if you're in a deal to get some really lucrative money from one government and then it changes, sometimes that money could be a little tied up in trying to get it from the next government. And that's kind of the issue that Mr. Vincent Nelson, King's Counsel, was facing. He had £1 million, being owed to him by the Trinidad and Tobago government. The Trinidad and Tobago government changed, but still he was struggling to get that money. It all began on October 6, 2017, when Justice Ricky Rahim granted a judgment in favor of Nelson, dismissing the state's application to strike out Nelson's claim for legal fees, which amounted to approximately £1 million. In the matter from which the £1 million legal fee claim had arisen, we don't need to know that matter. So, Mr. Nelson already went to court. And the court said that, yes, the government owes you this money. They have to pay you that money. The problem with that is, even if the court says that, the government has the opportunity to appeal that, then maybe they could send it to the Privy Council. Who knows how long this is all going to be tied up. So, although, yes, you have £1 million, yes, it is admitted that the government, at least from a lower court, it said the government owes you that money. You still cannot get your hands on that money yet, and he wants his money. For many different reasons, we're going to get into some of those reasons just now, but he wants his money. He wants the money that is owed to him. He's trying to get that money, and the government, the PNM government, bear in mind, this would have been the PNM government during that 2017 period after the partnership switched over. This is already 2 years. In 2017, he got this judgment. Already 2 years after the government's changed, he is still owed his £1 million. He cannot seem to get it. Now, this is an allegation made by Mr. King's Counsel. I am just reading news here. For any of the litigious members of this entire situation, I'm just reading news. I am not making these allegations. These allegations are already out there in the news. The allegation... So do you think that the government is right? We'll get to that, Matthew Kamiho. That's not how we go about this. We need to build the story before we decide who is right or wrong. We need to actually know the facts of the case. To just jump out and speak about right or wrong, we may not quite understand it yet. So, one of the early allegations of corruption in this whole thing, according to, in the course of the litigation for his claim for the outstanding fees, Nelson said former Attorney General Anna Ram Logan contacted him and informed him that he, Ram Logan, was still in possession of letterheads from the Office of the Attorney General. Nelson said Ram Logan also informed him, that he was prepared to sign and backdate a letter which would state that the monies claimed by Nelson in the lawsuit against the state were due and payable if Nelson agreed to pay 30% of the sums recovered to him by him to Ram Logan. So, Mr. Ram Logan, according to the King's Counsel, this isn't me saying this, according to the King's Counsel, he is saying that Mr. Ram Logan was approaching him about corruption even after they left power. Because what he is saying here is, while they were in the court trying to get his £1 million, the former Attorney General contacted him and said, hey, I have some letterheads hanging around, some old letterheads from back then. I could backdate a letter for you and let it be known that this money is owed to you and you'll get it very quickly. The catch is, once you get that money, run a 30% for me. That's bold. I'm just saying that if that is true, that is very bold. That's a straight up shakedown. Anyway, it doesn't seem like he took the former Attorney General up on that specific corruption offer. He began to get a guilty conscience, it would seem. You see, around that very same time, Mr. King's Counsel was diagnosed with cancer. So, he needed that money. the money started to get kind of scary on his side. He needed that money. He was racking up medical bills. He had to go to New York for one treatment. The treatment failed. Then he went to the United Kingdom for another treatment. It failed. Well, no, that one didn't fail. Sorry, that was when he was cured. But during this period in 2017 is when he was fighting that cancer battle. So while he's fighting that cancer battle, he needs that money. But it wasn't the money that caused him to go with that offer to the Attorney General. It is said that Faris Al-Rawi was informed of this matter by Nelson's attorney, Roger Kawal Singh. On October 5th, 2017, Al-Rawi asked whether Nelson would be prepared to officially disclose information regarding his relationship with Ram Logan. The AG's amended defense said, on or around 12th of October 2017, Roger Kawal Singh met with the defendant, that would be Al-Rawi, and informed him that Mr. Nelson had instructed him to advise Mr. Al-Rawi that he had evidence of wrongdoing on the part of Ram Logan and others, and that Nelson was willing to disclose that information. The lawyer for Mr. Nelson further disclosed to the Attorney General back then, Mr. Al-Rawi, that Mr. Nelson was gravely ill and wished to purge his conscience before he passed away. The man was sick, and he was saying that before he died, he wanted to do the right thing. He had some of this heavy weight on his conscience that he really wanted to get off. Now, this whole conscience argument, I understand, but it's also very coincidental that by making that deal, he was also able to get his 10 million much faster. The 10 million popped into his account much faster. Nelson already paid $1 million in indemnity agreement with government. And that's on top of the 10 million that he was already paid for the legal fees owed. In true government fashion, make sure you're dead before you get your money. The government of Trinidad and Tobago pays you what's owed. Yeah, but they paid him. So when he made that deal with the government, although it was about his guilty conscience, it also worked out really well for his bank account, because they paid him that money that they owed him and didn't bother to drag that out legally. Now, there could be an argument here where somebody could wonder, during this difficult time where the man needs some money, it's so coincidental. It's just such serendipity. That it works out so coincidental for him that just at that moment, his guilty conscience worked on him in such a way that he was able to come up with information and procure a deal to give him the money that he needed right at that moment. That's just, coincidental. Now, there are several things. There are many things that look a little strange with this deal. One of the first problems, though, is that the lawyer that was representing Mr. Nelson, the King's Counsel, his lawyer in Trinidad was one Mr. Kawal Singh. Was what? Not exactly. We'll get to that, Matthew. We'll get to that. His lawyer was Mr. Kawal Singh. Now, I don't know how many of you would be familiar with that name, but you might be if you're paying attention to news. There was some bacchanal about a certain Porsche that Mr. Al-Rawi sold, and there was some kind of confusion about who he sold it to and if there was any kind of special deal, and that was Mr. Kawal Singh. There were allegations that those two are friends. They know each other very well. Also, that same Mr. Kawal Singh was a member of the failed Police Service Commission. Remember that commission where everyone resigned on the commission? Yes, Mr. Kawal Singh was one of the members there too, where the texts were eventually leaked some internal texts were leaked, and it seemed like Mr. Kawal Singh was one who didn't really know what was going on with this whole Gary Griffith business. He was nearly seeming like he's leaning that, yes, same Mr. Kawal Singh. So Mr. Kawal Singh has some familiarity with Mr. Alrawi already. And he was the lawyer representing the King's Counsel when this deal was struck with Mr. Alrawi. All right. Now, all of that confusion inside of the deal is kind of, to me, kind of separate from the deal itself, separate from the information given out on the deal itself, because the allegations from this are very serious. In the statement made, notarized, signed by Mr. Nelson, he said that in late 2010, he was invited to meet with then Attorney General Anand Ram Logan to discuss the undertaking of legal services on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. He was informed that Ram Logan wanted to retain him to lead a probe into matters concerning Petrochin. Ram Logan wanted him to investigate things and corruption of a previous administration. Very interesting. Ramdeen was also retained. According to Nelson in his notarized statement, I returned to Trinidad on 5th November 2011 to commence work on the forensic probe. I was scheduled to leave on the 13th of November. During the visit, Mr. Ramdeen informed me that the Attorney General wished to have a meeting with me concerning the probes. The meeting took place in the AG's office. In attendance was Ram Logan, Ramdeen, and myself. The only subject of conversation at the meeting raised for the first time was the demand by Ram Logan for payment by me to Ram Logan of a percentage of the fees I was to receive from engagement on the probes. It was made clear that this was not a request, but a requirement. Let me take a little sip there. So according to this King's Counsel, he signed a statement with this information. The former Attorney General called him into his office, and in his office boldly told him of a kickback scheme that he must participate in if he is to get these legal fees. And he says that he did indeed participate in that scheme. He did indeed participate in that scheme, and he was given something like 40 million plus in government legal work during that time. He was given a lot of money, and he was kicking back that 10% to the Attorney General, according to him. Now, in this very same article, in his statement, he said that he raised the idea that this would be a bit of a problem. If he is just to go and pay the Attorney General some money just so, people are going to, be suspicious of this. This thing isn't going to add up. Obviously, people aren't going to think this thing making sense. So he says, the King's Counsel says that the Attorney General came up with a scheme, a fiction, as he called it. And the scheme was that he would pretend to rent some chambers from Mr. Ramdeen, another UNC senator. He would pretend to rent those chambers and pay Mr. Ramdeen rent for those chambers. And that rental fee would be, used to get it along to the rightful owner. And the thing with this is there seems to have been an actual payment trail. Attached to the notarized statement were copies of screenshots showing payments made from Nelson's NatWest bank account in the United Kingdom and his Sagicor bank account in Jamaica to Ramdeen's Scotia bank account in Trinidad and Tobago. Nelson confirmed in a subsequent interview with the ACIB that a total of £200,367 was paid in kickbacks during the period October 1st, 2010 to September 9th, 2015 by him. That's a serious allegation. Those are the allegations that are being leveled against those two former UNC members. And those were the charges that they were supposed to answer for. Now, the very aggravating thing with all of this is that the question now isn't even if those allegations are right. The UNC is saying that their members were vindicated, but that's not actually what happened. They weren't vindicated. The case just cannot go on. This information that was put out there by the King's Counsel, he signed this. He supplied the banking information. That information has never been recanted. He never came back and said, well, I made up that whole thing. He never said, well, this is all falsified information. He never said that. The information still stands as being true. That's not even the question right now. That's the kind of ridiculous nature of the law. The fact that everyone understands what the allegations are that are supposed to be being leveled against them, but nonetheless, there's nothing that can be done about it. We just have to sit here and watch them there. Yeah, ridiculous thing with the law. An interesting side piece on that, Nelson to ACIB, Ram Logan told me AG salary too small. Attorney Anna Ram Logan SC allegedly offered an apology to Vincent Nelson, King's Counsel, for asking for a kickback, saying the money he was earning as Attorney General at that time was very small, and he needed to supplement the salary to survive financially. The conversation allegedly occurred during a car ride to Nelson's home in Jamaica. This revelation was in police statements that Nelson gave to officers of the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau in January and February 2019. Now, if that is true, bear in mind, the Attorney General salary is something like $40,000 a month. And isn't it funny that 40,000 for some people is just not enough? I wonder how many people in Trinidad would die for a $40,000 salary. No, not $40. No, not 400. Of course, not 4,000. Do you think he works in a food outlet? No. It's $40,000, and it's still not enough. It is still, well, that's the allegation. It was still not enough. Now, the problem arose for this entire thing because of the nature of the deal that was made. In that indemnity agreement, it is alleged that Mr. Nelson was promised several things by the Attorney General. Let me see if we get all the list of the promises made. Right. Al-Rawi, I had no control over ACIB charging Nelson. Right. There were several promises made inside of that indemnity agreement that were supposed to be kept. And that's where the problems arose. In that indemnity agreement, what Mr. Nelson was offered, the allegations, what he was offered was that, one, he will not be prosecuted for this matter. And that's kind of understandable. That's a kind of sensible one. If you're trying to get someone to testify on a matter and implicate themselves, okay, well, we won't prosecute you for the matter. All right. That's one. The second one was, it was promised that all of his legal fees regarding this entire matter would be covered by the government. That one might be a little problematic. Here's one of the reasons why that one would be a little problematic. Because remember, the lawyer representing Mr. Nelson was a friend of the Attorney General. So, to be making as part of the deal a subsection that we will pay you for any work you do on this case could seem a little strange. And then probably the strangest part of the entire indemnity agreement was they promised to keep it all a secret. And I don't understand who made that promise and who thought that promise would have made sense. I don't understand that, because if you're looking to prosecute, I was trying to figure this out while I was following this entire story. If you're intending to prosecute someone, how is it possible that the only witness you have to the matter could remain hidden? How does that work? How is that figured? The one witness to the matter, the only witness you have, is going to remain hidden and secret? I don't understand that. Now, the problem started for Mr. Nelson when this was handed over to the DPP. So the initial part where he was not supposed to be prosecuted, bear in mind, the indemnity agreement, maybe I should be, Chiny Douglas, I could still be. The indemnity agreement was signed in 2017. In 2019, the DPP decided to press charges. You see, here's the problem. The Attorney General doesn't have the authority to make deals as regarding what you would be prosecuted or charged on. That's not within his purview. He doesn't have the ability to make those deals. So, if you're listening to him on those deals, it might be a little strange. He has the power to make recommendations to the DPP on what he thinks should be the charges. But it's still up to the DPP on what happens then. So, Mr. Nelson in 2019 was charged by the DPP, and he made a deal with the DPP. That was separate from his indemnity agreement. He made a deal with the DPP, a plea agreement, in which he agreed to testify, separate from his indemnity agreement. Plea discussions then took place with the DPP on May 2nd, 2019. A plea agreement was signed by the DPP, Roger Gaspard, Nelson, and British King's Counsel, Thomas Michael Shad Allen, attorney for Nelson. Under the plea agreement, it was acknowledged that Nelson was charged with conspiracy under the Prevention of Corruption Act, conspiracy contrary to common law, to commit misbehavior in public office, and conspiracy, yada, 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 with Ram Logan and Ramdeen on diverse days between October 1st, 2010 to September 9th, 2015. And everything regarding that. Nelson pleaded guilty to the offenses. Under the plea agreement, Nelson agreed to give evidence for the prosecution in any criminal proceedings brought by the state against Ram Logan, Ramdeen, and any other persons consistent with the truth and the contents of the statement or statutory declaration that he already gave. This was the deal he struck with the DPP. The DPP allowed him now to be able to leave Trinidad at his will. He was allowed to leave Trinidad at his will. The plea agreement stated that upon Nelson pleading guilty to the charges set out above, he shall discontinue the proceedings against him on the conspiracy charges, to recommend to each and every court before which Nelson shall appear in connection with this matter that the state considers that it would be appropriate for him to be granted bail without sureties until the final disposal of the criminal proceedings against him. So they will not hold him in jail. He is free to leave the country. He could fly away to England if he wants. He will not be held in jail. All of these little niceties were part of his deal with the DPP. This is in 2019. This is after his deal was already made with the Attorney General. The problem with this is, as soon as he was convicted, as he pled guilty and was convicted on this charge, he was also fined $2.25 million in Trinidad and Tobago. But from the moment he was convicted on bribery and conspiracy charges, his prestigious law firm kicked him out. He was unable to work. So poor man is now without a job. And he is saying that's because the government released that information. And because the government released that information, he is now without a job. King's Counsel cancer free. Nelson's money woes. As of December 2021, the King's Counsel was cancer free. Nelson was diagnosed in 2016, and we know all that history. Nelson took his sabbatical from practice and was treated in New York in 2017. Cancer returned, and he again had surgery in March 2018 in London. MRI showed he was cancer-free, and so he planned to return to work, but was advised to hold on. Now, when he decided to return on June 6, 2019, Nelson pleaded guilty to conspiring to commit money laundering, etc., etc. He was charged a month later. In May 2019, he was permanently excluded from membership of the 39 Essex Street Chambers in London because of his conviction. After his conviction, he tried to get work at commercial law chambers and even a utility company he previously represented, but was unsuccessful in getting work because his specialty, he's a tax attorney. Who is going to hire a tax attorney that has been convicted for money laundering and bribery? You know, that's something that would be a pretty big stain on your reputation as a tax attorney. Taxes are you and the government business. And now we know that you and the government are in some shady business, at least that government. So many people would just want to, you know, keep their distance from you. I'll find an ex-lawyer. Sorry, sir. Sorry, I'll find an ex-lawyer. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. And he is not happy about this. This is the very thing that he wanted to avoid. The problem here is, personally, I don't know how they planned really to avoid this. I don't understand how they really planned to avoid this. The blame is being thrown at Mr. Stuart Young because Mr. Stuart Young was the one who was handling the statement after Mr. Arawi got it. And Mr. Stuart Young sent the statement to the United Kingdom, which is, I don't understand. He sent the statement to the United Kingdom quickly. Let's see where we could pick up this story. I'm trying to find the article here. I'm trying to find the article where they have that little bit of information. All right. So Mr. Al-Rawi sold out Mr. Young and told Mr. Nelson's legal team that, well, it wasn't me who sent your statement up to the United Kingdom. That was Mr. Stuart Young. So they wanted to find out what was going on. It was also suggested he did not agree to give evidence, yada, yada, yada. Al-Rawi also allegedly told Nelson that his statement had been wrongly disclosed to the NCA that's in England by Young. Both Young and Nelson met on a British Airways flight from TT to London Gatwick in March 2020. Sounds like some covert kind of stuff on a secret airplane meeting. Nelson said Young came to his seat to converse. After Young was told that it was Al-Rawi who said that Young had disclosed the statement, the latter replied that as a lawyer, he wouldn't be so stupid because he knew it would be a breach of the agreement. It is alleged Mr. Stuart Young told him that in his face. Listen, I wouldn't be so stupid to go disclosing that to the NCA. Why would I do such a thing? Now, that is very strange because not too long after that, Mr. Stuart Young defended that very same statement. In a Facebook post, Mr. Stuart Young is quoted as saying that nothing could be wrong with disclosing or cooperating with a legal law enforcement agency, a legitimate law enforcement agency. So it could nearly seem like they hit Mr. Nelson a kind of double cross in a way there. But the unfortunate thing in that is if that was a double cross on their side where they sent his information up to United Kingdom and implicated him, Well, that worked out negatively for them because now the case against the two men they really wanted is kind of falling apart. You see, I understand Mr. Nelson's point. He is right now suing the government for something like $100 million in a civil case. $100 million, because he is saying that because of what they did, he can no longer work, and he is suing them for all his potential money that he might have made if they didn't double cross him. I think he might be right on that. He may have made all that money if not for the government. The problem is that he was the one who engaged in the criminal activity. Like, okay, fine, the government may have double crossed you on a deal, and we'll talk about all of that. But you were the one who did. It's not like they're fabricating this about you. They got you, they tricked you into confessing something that is true. Like, the only way I could see that somehow working, in my own understanding, is if they tricked you and what you said isn't actually true. But if you're saying all the information that you gave is actually true, like, what you want anyone else to do about that? You're facing the consequences of pretty much your own actions. The deal, though, is where lots of problems are arising. Lawyer calls out ex-AG's advisors in Nelson deal. Mr. Al-Rawi moved a bit intelligent in that way, at least in that sense, where he didn't make that deal all on his own. He had advisors advise him on how to make that deal. And people are calling out even the advisors. Two senior counsels who advised former Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi on the indemnity agreement with convicted King's Counsel Vincent Nelson are being asked to publicly come clean on their roles in drafting of the controversial statement. Yeah, lots of furor is being made. The legal fraternity seems to be in a bit of an uproar. The Law Association is making some demands for questions to be answered. Obviously, the opposition is making some demands for questions to be answered, and kind of rightfully, because there are several parts to it. Remember, you're trying to find information on a political opponent. From the moment you enter this being a political actor, any deal that you give someone for them to provide evidence on your political opponent, how would that look anyway else but some kind of political gamesmanship? How else would that look? That's why I heard, I can't remember who it was, a lawyer I believe was speaking, and they were saying that they advised the PNM government a long time ago to, if you're doing these things, form an independent committee to do them. So there isn't that political angle to it, but that's the way it went. It seems like it could have a political side where you're willing to pay someone lots of money, cut corners, give them a really, really nice deal just to get your political opponent. That's one side of it. And if you're willing to give someone inducements to get information on your political opponent, people could wonder how accurate the information might even be. And then the other side of that is the fact that you agreed to pay the legal fees of some, while knowing that one of the lawyers working there is a familiar to you. So one of the questions that many in the law fraternity are asking is how much legal fees was actually accumulated during that time. They're asking questions even of the current Attorney General. Armour must answer Vincent Nelson fiasco law body calling for response from Armour. The Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago is calling on the current Attorney General to answer some questions. They have quite a bit of statement there, but the questions that they have for the Attorney General are as follows. And these questions are from the law fraternity. So I suppose whether it was illegal, whether it was right, whether it was wrong, as Matthew was asking earlier on, these questions could be headed in that direction. One, whether the former Attorney General participated or was involved in the actual collection of evidence for the purposes of prosecution. Who collected the evidence? If the Attorney General was part of the evidence collecting part, there would be problems. Whether Vincent Nelson King Council continued to be the recipient of legal fees from the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago after he made a statement against interests in a criminal investigation. So, did you all continue to employ the man and pay him even after he gave that statement where, one, he implicated himself in a criminal conspiracy, and two, you are already giving him inducements to testify? 3, whether the fees referred to in the indemnity agreement being circulated in the public domain, which undertook that no civil proceedings will be commenced for repayment of any fees paid to you in respect to legal fees in the period 2010 to 2017, related to fees that were procured in a manner that was subject to criminal investigation and or the subject of the statement against interest made by Mr. Nelson King Council. So here's the question here. In the indemnity agreement, the government promised that they will not go after Mr. Nelson in civil proceedings, not criminal. You're not going to go to jail for it, just in terms of getting payment for it. They're not going to go after Mr. Nelson for any legal fees that were paid to him between 2010 to 2017. That was part of the indemnity agreement. But here's the problem there. By Mr. Nelson's own confession, some of those legal fees would have been paid to him as proceeds from crime to some extent, out of criminality. And are you saying that you signed an agreement that our government, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, will allow a criminal to go away with criminally earned taxpayers' money and not go after him for it? You understand the implications of that? Did you promise the man that you will not go after him for any of the money paid to him, while acknowledging at the same time that the money was corruptly gained? That will not be adding up. 4, whether in procuring the indemnity agreement, the former Attorney General negotiated a plea agreement, which is the exclusive remit of the DPP. And this is the little wiggle room that is in there. The Attorney General does have legal authority to do an indemnity agreement from the government side of things. He does not have the authority to do a plea agreement. That's under the remit of the DPP. They're wondering if in getting this deal done, promises were made in such a way that it was a plea agreement that was made in the long run. And is that what the Attorney General did, overstepping his authority? 5, why did the former Attorney General enter into an agreement with a potential witness in a serious criminal matter involving a political opponent, which requires the parties to conceal evidence from Parliament? Part of the agreement was the secrecy. And how could you go into an agreement trying to get information on a political opponent and then pledge them to secrecy away from the Parliament? The Parliament is where politicians are supposed to answer scrutiny. And if you are making a deal targeting your political opponent, well, then that's something that should get or should be able to be scrutinized. And are you saying that you did this and as part of the deal, you made it that it cannot be disclosed to Parliament? And the 6th and final question by the Law Association, a detailed account of all funds paid to Mr. Nelson King's counsel and his proxies, servants, or agents, including his attorneys arising out of the indemnity agreement, together with appropriate vouching and justification, including legal fees, fines, or outstanding fees, taxes, or liens paid on his behalf. They want all the money, a list of all the money that was paid out to Mr. Nelson from that indemnity agreement. And I think that's a fair request. How much money was paid out? Because the indemnity agreement promised that we were going to pay all his legal fees. Now, who is to say those legal fees won't just be inflated? You have a blank check from the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Your lawyer could say he's working 24 hours round the clock for 7 days a week, and the government would just have to pay that. Potentially. That's what the Law Association is asking for. A detailed account of all fees paid out by this indemnity deal. All fees. And I think that is a pretty fair request. Now, the Attorney General does not want to answer this, obviously. He wants to have no part in this at the moment. AG declines Law Association request for full disclosure. Attorney General Reginald Armour has declined the request from the Law Association for disclosure in relation to the collapse of the corruption case against, we know who it's against. The Law Association made the request in a press release. Armour responded in a letter sent to the Law Association president. In the correspondence, Armour said he was surprised by the call for disclosure, as the association was aware his office was currently defending a lawsuit from the state's main witness against the duo, Jamaican Right, over the alleged breach of indemnity agreement. It surprises me, therefore, that the association should have issued a public statement in the first place, more so to issue a call for me as Attorney General to engage in a public discussion of very serious issues, which are clearly governed by the sub judice rule and which may influence or impact the outcome of those proceedings. So he cannot talk about it because it's currently before the courts. So it's sub judice. He cannot comment on it. Of course. And that's what I was saying at the very beginning of this. The lawyers are the problem. It's all lawyers all around in this whole thing. Every direction you look in, it's lawyers. Another lawyer here, another lawyer here, another lawyer there. Oh, look, another lawyer. Whose fault is this? Oh, another lawyer, of course. And bear in mind, during this whole thing, all of these issues, lawyers are being paid for this during this. But I guess, what do we expect? When the majority of politicians going into that political field are lawyers, these lawyers come together and draw up the laws of the country, and then we are surprised that the lawyers that drew up the laws of the country get a lot of preferential treatment from the same laws of the country. That's so shocking, isn't it? The legal profession. Someone asked if I think it is wrong. Now, I think that's a separate question from if it's legal. Whether it's legal or illegal, I think none of us have the answer to that. At least I don't. And we'll see where that goes as people with more legal acumen answer that going on. And I guess some of these matters are before the court, so we'll figure out if it's legal or not real soon. Well, probably not that soon. But as for right or wrong, that's a very difficult question in such a case. That's a very difficult question. How do you judge that? If there is corruption in the previous administration, factual, if there is that reality, and there is an opening where you could get someone to be a witness in bringing down those responsible for that corruption, what is a sufficient deal that can be offered? Is it that no deal should be offered? What would be too good of a deal? And in such a case, who is to do that? Who has the authority and the purview to do that? Who should it be? The Attorney General is the senior legal counsel for the country, basically. But he's also a political appointee. Being a political appointee, his neutrality could always be questioned. And if you have someone with questionable neutrality in law enforcement against their political opponents, you could understand why that would nearly always be painted in a negative light. But does that mean it's wrong? Should that mean that they shouldn't make that attempt? I'm not sure. But I always with a lot of these confusing things, I always reach down to asking and wondering, sometimes, are these things done on purpose? Like, did they purposefully mess up this entire thing and make it so complicated and contorted a mess that no one is going to face any consequences at the end of this? The first former Attorney General and his alleged co-conspirator, their case has been dropped. Well, we don't know if the case would be picked back up at some further point in time, but for the moment, it has been dropped. That's one. The next former Attorney General, Mr. Al-Rawi, they're asking questions about him, but nearly surely there isn't any consequence for him to pay. Even if it's found out the deal was a bad deal, what are they going to do? The lawyer for Mr. Nelson has already been, the lawyers for Mr. Nelson have already been paid. The only people really losing and paying out of their pockets in this are us, the taxpayers in the country, the citizens of the country, because they're all winning. They're all winning. Mr. Nelson himself, although he's struggling, he has some struggles to face because he cannot get a job right now. Bear in mind, he was already paid tens of millions of dollars out of Trinidad and Tobago's coffers. If we're looking at a balance sheet in terms of how much money Mr. Nelson paid into Trinidad versus how much money Mr. Nelson got paid out from Trinidad, he is far, far, far in the black. We're in the red as the country. We have paid him already tens of millions of dollars, and now there's a lawsuit where, we may have to pay him 100 million more. So, okay, he's struggling in terms of his professional life, it might seem. Who knows where the full reality of all of that what it might be. But although he might be struggling there, he has still made a profit combined of Trinidad and Tobago already. So he isn't really losing in that anyway. It's only us. All right. Any comments or questions inside of the chat before I dive out? See, everyone inside of the chat was just silent today. Like the story was just too contorted for too much small talk. Like when you read this, when you combine the whole story together, this is a House of Cards episode. No, it's not a House of Cards episode. It's a season. This is a House of Cards season. You can make a whole season out of this. You see that airplane meeting? You meet on the airplane and he came over to his seat. Good day. I'm Minister Steve Young. Oh, hi. I'm Vincent Nelson, King's Counsel. Stuff made from movies. Yes, any further comments or questions inside of the live, or shall I dive out? Maybe we could have a little afterlife chill over on TikTok. It's been a while. I'll have probably a little 10 minutes afterlife chill on TikTok. It's been quite a while since that was done. All right, it seems like there aren't any comments or questions in general. So I will see you guys for the next Mindful Live. That's tomorrow evening at 9:15 thereabouts. I hope you were educated, informed, or entertained. I'll be over on TikTok for a little while longer for a little afterlife chill. It's been a long time since that was done, so I'll be there for a little while longer.